Hi everyone, and welcome back to Lemon Dew. I'm Brie, and in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the subject of autism and perfectionism. So without further ado, let's begin. So autism and perfectionism are two things that often go hand in hand with each other. Now, of course, before I take a look at some of the traits as well as my personal experience having a perfectionist mentality, I'm going to talk about the definition of perfectionism. So perfectionism is basically a personality trait in which an individual can set exceptionally high standards for themselves, with the overall aim being to obtain complete flawlessness. In terms of perfectionism and autism, this causes the individual to have negative traits, mainly in terms of having a black and white way of thinking, only seeing things as good or bad, or of course right and wrong. Because of this mentality, it causes autistic individuals to control as many aspects of life as possible. And when something goes wrong, it's very easy to self-criticize. Now, in my personal experience, I would definitely say that I've often spent my childhood as well as teenage years trying to produce high quality work. I've always strived to prove myself as an academic, especially because a lot of people would underestimate my knowledge as well as skill, presuming me to be completely stupid just because I have autism. There have been many instances where I would strive to try and achieve high grades, only to end up failing and having a breakdown because I couldn't deal with failure. So, for example, when it came to my years in education, if there was an instance where I cared about a subject and I received an average grade, I would often get upset and be reduced to tears. For example, when I got a C in GCSE art as well as a 2-2 in my illustration degree, I was not happy because I felt like I put so much effort into a craft that I really cared about, only to receive a grade which was a poor reflection of myself as well as the quality of work I produced. The same applied to spelling tests or even math tests in secondary school. Because I was deemed as a smart student, if there was an instance where I got a perfect score, I would have to try my best to maintain it. If I got less than 20 out of 20, teachers would automatically shame me because I was unable to maintain that perfect average. And there were instances where my peers would make fun of me at times because I got poor scores and had an off day. So this really got on my nerves, partially because I felt embarrassed and also because I felt like I was never good enough, no matter how hard I tried. Apologies for the coughing. I have been sick for the past couple of days, so I'm just going to continue. So with perfectionism, it can be very difficult to accept failure. Of course, in the case of trying to accept failure, it's very difficult for autistic individuals to come to terms with the fact that sometimes you might not be good at everything. Now, of course, with perfectionism, autistic individuals may have instances where they can be very stressed and burnt out. And perfectionism in itself plays a part in daily life. So in the case of individuals with autism, there's this need to connect perfectionism to their identities. You have to be the best at a specific game. You need to have the most knowledge about a topic of interest. And of course, if you look at the educational or a work setting, there is this emphasis on needing to perform at 100%. So as per mentioned, with my experiences growing up in an education system that wasn't equipped for supporting a person like myself, teachers would emphasize this constant need to get high grades. In the eyes of your teachers, if you failed to achieve high grades in school, college, or university, you would be perceived as a failure. And of course, the only thing you would potentially amount to in their eyes was doing a dead-end job for minimum wage in a fast food or retail setting. In the case of work, it is the same thing. If your employer sees that you are not performing at 100%, they will automatically question you and reprimand you. And in some cases, depending on your employer, you could potentially get fired from your job if you do not produce adequate results. Even family can put pressure on autistic individuals. So sometimes you have instances where in certain cultures, particularly the Caribbean or even Asian cultures, for example, there is this need for a child to be perfect. And having a perfect child is great for parents and extended family members because they can brag about how they're doing in school and how their aspiration is to, say, be a lawyer in a top firm, for example. So of course, this will make their peers feel inadequate in comparison to them, but in turn would make the individual feel a certain type of way because, again, there is this constant need to maintain that perfect average in order to impress others around them. Now, when it comes to controlling parts of my life, this is something that I try to do as best as I can because the world is mostly catered to extroverts and neurotypical individuals, aka people who are not so much like myself. I have to find ways to keep grounded as best as I can, whether it's by having a repetitive routine in the morning or being in a job where I can have a start or finish time that's the same, or being told in advance when I'm supposed to start, when I'm supposed to finish, so that way at least I have some form of sanity. Now, over the past couple of years, one thing I can say I've really learned about the world is how unpredictable everything is, because you have no idea what can or can't happen. Now, even though perfectionism can be seen as a negative trait, there are actually some positive aspects, mainly in terms of attention to detail, which is something I take pride in at work, as well as the need to focus on one task at a time in due diligence. These qualities in workplaces can actually prove to be a valuable asset because it shows that potential that autistic individuals have a lot to offer. And having potential is seen as a great thing, especially because there is room for growth. Now, of course, going back to the subject of failure and never feeling good enough, I'm one of those people that wants to make sure whatever I do is to a high standard, particularly when it comes to my creative aspects like my artwork. When it comes to art, if there is an example where, I don't know, I'm producing a drawing or a YouTube video and I don't like the look of it, I know I will need to start again because I am a person who strives to maintain high quality work for people to enjoy. Now, I know it is a bad thing, especially because this can increase procrastination. And of course, with procrastination, the problem is you get put off with starting a particular project or something because you know that whatever you do may not be good enough. Now, of course, there are ways in which you can combat perfectionism. So one of the main things to learn about life is that you need to practice self-compassion. With self-compassion, you treat yourself with kindness and you say encouraging things to yourself in order to feel better about any failures you have. Now, of course, with compassion, this is something I try to practice a lot, especially around people I care for, because if a friend is experiencing an issue with perfectionism or if they fail at something, I would want to try to reassure them as much as I can, but I also want to make sure I'm doing that for myself. Now, another thing to learn is that life is about trying and failing, and it is okay to fail. Now, anybody who says it's not okay to fail really has something wrong with them, because you don't get better at something unless you've experienced failure. So if, say, for example, you are practicing how to play an instrument like a guitar and you can't strum the right notes, you will need to understand that it takes years of practice for you to become a professional. And the more you practice is the more you get better at something. And the more you fail is the more you get better at something. Because with failure, it's very easy to identify what went wrong in order for you to get better at a potential subject, or even, again, when you're practicing an instrument as an example. It's also very important to set realistic goals. So back in my university years, for example, whenever I produced a piece of work, I couldn't just produce the finished piece without having the additional work that showed myself as well as my peers and my tutor how I got to my final concept. So whenever I was creating a project for university, I would plan everything from A to B. So I would spend some time on themes and concept research. So let's just say a week on that. Another week where I would experiment with materials whilst doing additional research on artists who could potentially inspire my work. Another week developing experiments. Another week producing final piece mock-ups, and another week planning a final piece as well as creating the finished work. And of course, you would have the instance where you would evaluate everything you've done. Now, from going from point A to point B with this particular plan, you had a breakdown, a realistic breakdown of what you wanted to produce. And that is what setting realistic goals does. It allows you to break things down one step at a time so that you can focus on one thing whilst taking those necessary steps. So that is today's episode on autism and perfectionism. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and of course in the new year I will be releasing episodes on a fortnightly basis. So I just want to let you know that I am going to be going on a hiatus. So until the 8th, I am going to be taking a break from recording my podcast. And to be specific, that's the 8th of February, which is a Saturday, because normally I release episodes on a Sunday and I record on Saturdays, or on occasions like today, where I don't have work the next day, I record and release on the same day. So my next episode is going to be about the subject of third places, which is something that's actually fascinated me for some time, especially because I have been listening to YouTube videos where people talk about their experience with third places, as well as why you don't see many of them around. I actually wanted to do a podcast episode at some point where I talk about my personal experience with third places. And I also want to do a little bit of detailed coverage on the issues surrounding youths and why most of them turn to crime, because I feel like it kind of relates to the subject of third places. And in a sense, it kind of relates to my job, considering the field that I'm working in, which is quite ironic, I guess. So my next episode is going to be recorded on the 8th of February and released on the 9th of February 2025. And as per mentioned, going forward from the new year after the 9th of February, episodes will continue to be released on a fortnightly basis. So until then, I hope you guys have a great Sunday. I hope you enjoy your New Year's celebrations, whatever it is you plan to do. If you have any goals in mind for the new year, that's great. If not, that's fine. I do apologise again for the coughing because I have been sick. So anyway, until then, this is goodbye for now.